Tara Major, Legislative Director for State Representative Jim Hawkins. I'll talk louder. I am also the elected member on State Committee for Bristol and Norfolk District and one of the organizers of this event. Thank you all so much for coming. I see a lot of people that were here at our first event, and I see a lot of new faces, which is amazing because that's exactly what our intent is, to get people organized and energized and to be together. I'd like to, well, I'll first tell you there's water, coffee, and snacks on the back table. If anyone's interested, please help yourself. There are also some materials on the tables. Some will be used for the presentations you'll be seeing, and some are just informational, upcoming events and such. I'd like to acknowledge some of the elected officials that serve our community that have come out tonight. We have, of course, State Representative Jim Hawkins. Some of my colleagues on State Committee, we have Marilyn Powers, we have Jackie Curtis, we have Ellen Parker and Bill Bowles, and we have Chair of the City Committee, Chris Frappier, and he's also a member of our School Committee. Do we have any veterans, service members, past or present in the House? Thank you for your service and sacrifice. So in the spirit of saving time, I will introduce our first speaker, who is the face of my office and the most hardworking and committed state representative, I think, at the State House. Your state rep, Jim Hawkins.
The part that Tara's not saying is when I work hard, she works like 10 times as hard because I give her so much to do. This was probably my idea, but she's the one that did all the work to organize it and put it together. So she should probably be getting the credit for this. This is our second in a series. It's a little bit of a lift for us in a two-person office to put on an event like this on top of our day job. But I felt that it was important that people get together. Particularly people that aren't normally involved in the political process. I told all my colleagues in the legislature about this, but I didn't ask them to come because I don't want, I don't want, we're already on board with this. We need to organize as a community. So this is a little different audience than what I'm used to. I can get my friends here anytime. I have a fundraiser, they'll all come. So it's not that. This is about what to do about what's going on in Washington. The news, I can't sleep at night because of the news, but I don't want this to be about repeating the news and what we're afraid of. That would not be particularly constructive. So we've put together Harris Gruman. Bless him, his car broke down and he made it here. Anyway, Harris Gruman and I have been... Yeah, well, the first event we had was with Frank Callahan, who, if you didn't come to that event, he is the president of Mass Building Trades, and he's been an organizer since he was this tall. So we had him talk about how to get involved politically. But the feedback was that we needed to come back with a little of agenda as to what the next step should be. And Harris, I think you're going to enjoy his conversation. He's president of SEIU, very wise, and I think you'll enjoy. That's an understatement, but you'll enjoy his conversation. Another criticism was that it was all white people, and I don't change that demographic at all when I'm here. So Mark will speak from Young Dems, and we also have Lily and Joey who will speak a little bit from the youth perspective, because I think we've missed the boat on that. Youth are not as engaged. And I can tell you, when young people speak, people listen. When I get up with a suit and tie on, they're just blah, 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 blah. So we want to engage youth in this. And then Jillian is going to bring some expertise to one of the other things that people are concerned about. And this just happened in some conversations today. Well, how do you believe? What do you know? How do you understand what you're seeing? We get a barrage of information online and in the news, and it's kind of craziness. So hopefully she can put some context to that. But I'll thank you all for coming. This is important. We need to be together as a community and respond to this, and know that there's other people that are worried about this, not just you and me. And think about, this should be about what we can do. I hope you signed in, because I'd like to invite, the next one might be a while because it takes us a while with just two of us to do another one. But we'd like to do another one after this, but we want your feedback what you would like different after you hear this presentation, what you might like different about the next, because I don't think this problem is going away anytime soon. Trump is in for a 4-year term, so we need to be on our game, and we won't be unless you tell us what you would like the next one to be. So please sign in. It's just me and Tara. We can't do anything wrong with your information that would be scary, but we'd like to, and if there is another, when there's another one, we'd like to invite you to it. So, who am I introducing next? Okay, Harris. Harris Gruman is president of SEIU, and we have had lengthy conversations starting back to when Frank Callahan was here, and I'm very impressed with how he thinks and what he thinks. So, thank you for coming out.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm actually not the president, just to get it. I mean, I'm the executive director. Paul will appreciate that because he's a president of a union, and executive directors and presidents, where it's a different job title. So, well, I'm not an elected officer. I'm the director behind the scenes, I guess. But I work a lot with the state legislature, and I think that the things that we're dealing with right now have their origin before Donald Trump got elected. If Donald Trump has just brought it to an incredibly intense head, that we have to deal with. So I'm going to focus on one thing, which is my union, the Service Employees International Union, mainly represents low-wage workers in the service industries. We have 120,000 members in Massachusetts. About half of them, more than half of them, 75,000 are what we call direct care workers. They are either working on home care for the elderly and for people with disabilities, or they work in the group homes and the agencies that handle mental health, substance use, developmental disabilities. They're the people who do real hands-on care work, okay? Well, this direct care system in Massachusetts is in a very severe, what I call triple crisis now. Now, the crisis that pre-existed this year was that we were having an increasingly big problem with staffing. And there's a very simple reason for why this was a problem. People in this work, there's 75,000 members, for example, but also the many more than that who do this work are paid $18 an hour non-union and $21 an hour union. Neither of those is it possible to live in this state and pay your rent on that kind of pay. And these are people doing incredibly difficult work. So we are down right now, we have 35% vacancies in these agencies and group homes. That is dangerous. Those are dangerous levels of understaffing. And these are life and death situations often. I mean, our members have to work triple shifts on Christmas Day to fill the minimum coverage needed to carry these things out. And so what happens is, either because they can't afford to live in their home anymore, they move out of state, or they get a job. It's what I call the Walmart syndrome. I went down to Walgreens, actually, down near my house, and a member of ours was there at the cashier, and I said, "Oh, you got a second job to, help pay the rent?" And she said, "No, I get paid the same wages here, and I don't have to take the heartache home with me." So I quit. That is not good news, because she's a very good caretaker. She was a very good worker. So this is the crisis we were in already, okay? And in December, we put together a way to solve the crisis, at least to stabilize it. And that was 3 bills, which your representative is very supportive of. One was to raise the minimum wage for all these care workers, union and non-union, to $25 an hour, so that they have closer to a living wage. Keep them in their jobs. Second was to actually pass local option rent stabilization. So in the gateway cities and in Boston, the rents could be stabilized at 5% growth maximum a year. That way people stay in their homes. These folks don't want to leave their homes. They're not homeless, but they're all on the verge of having to move on because of the 10, 15% increases in rents. And then the third is how you pay for those wages, right? Well, in a way, the rent stabilization helps, because if the rents aren't going up as much, you don't need to raise the wages as much. And just to make a simple plug for that, the question I have to ask always, why should employers and the state taxes that pay a lot of these folks, why should they do everything to keep these people in their homes and in their jobs, and the real estate interests do nothing at all. You know, it's a balance. We're asking for a balance. But the other pay for was, we looked around and we said, well, you know, there's a tax that we don't fully use in this state. It's a tax on billionaire multinational corporations who avoid taxes by putting their profits in offshore tax havens. It's called GILTI. And the federal government named that, I didn't. But it means Global Intangible Low Taxed Income. And what that means is global, because it's out there in the world. Intangible, because we can't put our hands on it, our Department of Revenue can't get hold of it. Low tax, because a lot of these places actually charge no, you know, they require no taxes at all. And income, meaning income they earned in Massachusetts. This is an estimate of the income they make in Massachusetts. And they, you know, what they do is they have subsidiaries, these really big companies, like Amazon, or Tesla, or, you know, many of Goldman Sachs and others. They have subsidiaries in places like Liechtenstein or the Cayman Islands where they say, well, we have a business there. The business is this big. It's the size of a post office box. And they said we had to give them $10 million to use our logo in Massachusetts. So we didn't make any profit in Massachusetts. Well, I mean, that's a scam. So the federal government allows us to tax 50% of that global intangible low taxed income if we choose to. We currently only tax 5% of it. And that is sort of strange because our neighboring states tax 50%. Maine, New Hampshire, not a famous pro-tax state, Vermont, Rhode Island, they all tax 50%. We only tax 5%. So we said, well, this is great. This is easy because it's just conforming to the federal law and our neighbors do it. It's fair because 99% of businesses can't use these foreign tax havens. And so they're competing at an unfair advantage to these big companies. And it's popular, and we polled on it, 84% of people in Massachusetts said, I like that. And well, that was like, that's the highest thing I ever heard for a tax policy ever. So it's something that would pay, it raises hundreds of millions of dollars. We don't know the exact amount yet, but it's hundreds of millions. And that would pay for raising the wages of these workers. Well, that's where we were in December. We were all ready to like stabilize the system. And then in January, the governor told us we have a $1 billion hole in our budget. Now, I don't want to say anything too negative about the governor, but she did cut taxes when she came in. We had just raised taxes with the Fair Share Amendment. You're all familiar with the Fair Share Amendment, the millionaire's tax, to help deal with some of these crises. And she cut $1 billion in taxes. Some of it going right back to the same people we just asked to pay more through other, tax cuts. Well, now we're $1 billion in the hole. I mean, at the time, it didn't look like that was going to happen, so I can't say that was a terrible mistake, but it is a problem now. And the problem is, she said, we're going to solve it by cutting Health and Human Services. She put on the table right away, and that's why we were the first to hear about it, because we are a Health and Human Service union. They said, we're going to cut half the caseworkers in mental health, the Department of Mental Health. I mean, these are people who do teen suicide watch. Half of them in one blow. Closed 2 hospitals, you might have heard about, Pappas and Pocasset, 2 mental health hospitals. Freeze all the hospital payments, and also cap the home care program at 3% growth. That home care program grows in double digits every year and needs to. Otherwise, people have to go to a nursing home, which is much more expensive and often much more unpleasant because they're no longer in their homes, or the emergency room. So this is not a good idea because the demand is there. So it's a cut. You could almost say it outlaws aging. You can't get older and need this care. So why Health and Human Services? Well, this is actually one of the ironies of the millionaire's tax, the Fair Share Amendment. It earmarks the money for education and transportation. Now, I wrote it, so I have to take the blame for that. Why did we do that? Because when we asked people, everybody said that's what state government does. Education, transportation, I mean, everybody agreed on that. And we wanted to win. So we said that's what it'll go to, because they didn't want it to go to something like waste or whatever, some idea like that. The problem is then when you want to cut something, there's a kind of constitutional lockbox now around education and transportation, because if you cut it, it looks like you're playing a shell game with the revenue from the millionaire's tax. So your first place you go then is the biggest item in the state budget, which is Health and Human Services. And that's where you cut, because there's nothing protecting that. So suddenly we have a new crisis on top of the first crisis I described, a new $1 billion of cuts to Health and Human Services, direct care. Most of it is direct care. So we said, well, we have the solution. We have this tax on guilty. We need to do it. It'll raise hundreds of millions of dollars, and then use that to justify using reserves. We have a $9 billion reserve fund in this state, one of the biggest in the country. We can use those reserves and we don't have to cut anybody's health care, because that's a life and death issue. Well, we're in that debate and discussing all of that when Trump then, is elected in the meanwhile, and then comes forward and says, well, this is what Republican administrations have done since Ronald Reagan. They want to eviscerate the progressive income tax system in this country at the federal level, because wealthy people do pay more percentage-wise than other people, and that's actually necessary to be able to fund things for everybody. And they hate that. It's what we call tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires, right? But they want to wipe out that system. They've wanted to do it since Ronald Reagan, for sure. It's very hard to do, though, because where do you make the cuts to make up for it? And again, the progressive income tax, almost entirely, the biggest thing it goes to is Medicaid and Health and Human Services. So again, Health and Human Services have another target on their back at the federal level. If you want to cut taxes for the rich, you have to cut health care for everybody else, okay? And that's why they're saying we're going to do $1 trillion in cuts to Health and Human Services, most of it to Medicaid. And that's money that if this state loses, we'll lose $2–3 billion a year, easy, on top of what I already said. So this is how big a crisis we're in. And we've been in this crisis before. In 2002, we had a very similar situation. It's certainly as serious a situation as this. The Bush administration wanted to cut Medicaid. That would have devastated the state. We were in a deep recession, so we had a huge shortfall, a $2 billion shortfall, and we didn't have any reserves in that day. Not $9 billion, but nothing. So same coalition that works on this today came forward and called ourselves the Stop the Cuts Coalition. We said, look, let's raise over $1 billion in new taxes, and included in that must be taxing capital gains the same as wages. Because in those days, Massachusetts taxed long-term capital gains at 0%. That meant that the limited partners of the Red Sox, when they sold the Red Sox and made $800 million in profits, paid 0% tax on that. Whereas the average direct care worker was paying 5.3% at that time, taxes. So we said that's just wrong and it has to be fixed. And when we first brought it up, people said, oh, it's off the table, we can't deal with that now, we don't want to do taxes. By May, because of all the pushing that people did, like yourselves, a lot of people down actually in Southeast, we had that big thing in Dartmouth, meeting the legislators. It was very powerful. In the end, the Speaker of the House then, Tom Finneran, said this is the most politically viable option to deal with this crisis. And he passed taxing the capital gains the same as wages and other tax measures. One of the outcomes of that that's very worth knowing is that the capital gains piece brought in so much money every subsequent year that Finneran said, I'm going to take the excess over what we thought this was going to bring in and put it into a reserve fund. Well, today we have a $9 billion reserve fund, and every penny of it comes from the tax on capital gains at the same rate as wages. So out of that struggle in 2002 to save our schools and our health care and all these things, we built a reserve fund that can save them again. So when we're faced with all these things, we have a very simple answer. We do the guilty tax, and that justifies the use of reserves at a very serious level, because that's what you have to show the bond raters. They're going to say, oh, you're throwing all your reserves into this? You won't have any reserves left. But if you put real new money on the table, it's like our bond bills. We just did a bond bill in January for transportation, and the governor put up $500 million of the millionaire's tax for it, because that's for transportation. and borrowed $8 billion against it without any negative effect on our bond rating or our standing as a state. So if we get the few hundred million from GILTI, then we can use reserves. And what we're doing then is flipping the script on the Elon Musk Trump presidency, because they want to cut health care and human services for regular people in order to give tax breaks to billionaires. We say we want to tax billionaire multinational tax avoiding companies to provide care for everybody in the state of Massachusetts. So that's our program. So I don't know, are we doing question and answer, or are we going through all three speakers first, or how should we proceed? Tara, what was your thought? Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yes, I'd be happy to do that. So in a way, what I'm saying is this is a way to strike back at what's happening in D.C. We can't affect D.C. very directly, but we can prove there's a different way of doing things, and that becomes a beacon to the whole country of what we can do. So yes, the next speaker is Jillian Amaral, a lifelong Attleboro resident and been a librarian for 20 years. She has spent the last 9 years as a science librarian at local colleges, and she's currently at Harvard University. Jillian's first career, and why she's a science librarian, was as a cell biologist. So please welcome Jillian Amaral.
Hi everyone, Jillian Amaral. Nice to see all of you. I'm going to change the script a little bit, and we're going to talk about some things that are less political and more things you can use every day and are really necessary these days for us to use every day. So we're going to start really easy and friendly, and we're going to talk about advertising messaging. I want to talk about all different types of messaging and how you can really kind of understand the meaning behind these messages. And so let's start with advertising. So I have some example advertisements up here. I've got Nike, I've got De Beers diamonds here. What 2 months' salary is worth, can last forever. And Walt Disney, and then L'Oreal. What are these people selling? Why do we care? Why do they care? Feelings, yeah, they want to get a feeling in you. They want to maybe be inspirational. I think Nike has a certain idea there, maybe aspirational. Maybe if I buy Nikes, all of a sudden I'm going to look like this athlete here. Okay, so we're pretty used to advertising, right? It's not just what you see. Disney may not be the happiest place on earth. I've seen kids at Disney. There's meltdowns, right? So you know there's kind of an idea they're selling, okay? Pop culture has a lot of messages. Who knows what this movie is? Frozen, right? Easy peasy. Has anyone seen the teaser trailer, the original trailer of Frozen? Does anyone remember this? It's only 1 minute and 30 seconds, so I'm going to show it.
Ooh, hello.
before? Okay. Has anyone seen Frozen? Yes. Does that trailer give an accurate description of the movie Frozen? No. No. How is it different? Feel free to shout something out.
None of the main characters are in the trailer.
Yeah, none of the main characters. Is it a slapstick, humorous movie about an reindeer and a polar bear? Snowman, thank you. No. It's pretty dark in times, right? It's pretty scary at times. But this is the trailer they put out. Does anyone know why this is the trailer they put out?
It's all positive emotions.
All positive emotions. What else? Funny. It's funny, right? It looks silly. It looks like the whole family's going to enjoy this, right? There's no scary boat crashes in this trailer, right? What is unique? Does anyone know what's really unique about Frozen that Disney had never done before? About the leads in Frozen. There's two things. Two female leads, and what's the other thing about the leads? There's no romantic interaction between the leads. It was the first time in Disney history. So the executives at Disney were really nervous about this. So their teaser trailer is very different from the movie because when you get people in on the opening weekend, then word of mouth does the job. So all of these people, it opened on Thanksgiving in 2013. Tons of people went expecting this, right? And got a wonderful movie, but a very different movie. So think about behind the scenes, why they did the things they did, right? It's not that they didn't know the plot of the movie that this was the trailer for. It's that they wanted to show the feeling of what they wanted to sell to people, right? It didn't stop people from coming, but it wasn't an accurate description. So social media and pop culture has messaging just like advertisement. And messaging can change over time. So these are the four main posters from Frozen over time. The first one on the far left, right, has Olaf front and center, has everyone else kind of hidden in snow. Doesn't really seem like the movie that I saw in the theater. And then you can see, okay, now we have these people. It looks like we have two couples maybe going on a madcap adventure with a reindeer. And then when the movie started getting more and more popular, they brought in more of the elements. The third poster is the first time you get any idea of Elsa's magical abilities because they were afraid of boycotts from the people who were upset by Harry Potter, right? There's too much magic going on. And then it's not until it was a worldwide success in the fourth poster that you see Elsa front and center, you see her kind of magical abilities with her snowflakes, and you get an idea of who's really in the movie. Hans over here is in the first two movies, and then he disappears, right? Because he was kind of a side character. So think about all the things that you kind of are presented with, right? There are reasons you're presented with, especially when there's money involved, especially when there's influence involved. So now we turn to the more serious part. Right now, it's scary to read the news. It's confusing to read the news. You may see one thing on social media, another thing on network television, another thing in the newspaper. So we need to kind of go and absorb and evaluate our news just the way we would evaluate things that we're purchasing or entertainment we're going to see. You wouldn't necessarily bring a young child to go see Deadpool, right? Because you're going to find out about the thing first. There are ratings. So you have to be an informed consumer of your news. There was a time that we could trust our news to give us exactly what we thought we were getting. That time is over. So there's a really helpful way of evaluating information, and this can be for all information, and it's called SIFT. And it was developed by a gentleman named Mike Caulfield, and he developed this after teaching thousands of college students, ways to evaluate information that's reproducible and can be used for all different types of information. And SIFT stands for Stop, Investigate the Source, Find Better Coverage, and trace claims, quotes, and media to the original context. So essentially, you're gonna stop. You're not gonna forward that email, you're not gonna forward that meme until you understand what you're reading. Where's the source from? Is this a reliable source? Does the information seem at all plausible? Now, I know that's a tough one these days, but kind of get a feeling for what you're doing, okay? Then, you're gonna investigate the source. If you're not familiar with the source, read up on it. If you're not familiar with the author, find out, do they have any kind of accreditation for what they're writing? Do they have any sort of information? What are their credentials? Who's funding what you're reading? This is especially important when you're reading medical information that maybe is being brought to you by network news. They'll say this new report is out and you can drink as much caffeine as you want all day long with no side effects, right? Then you read the actual report and that's not exactly what they say, okay? So you really have to understand, what are their biases? Are they telling you, oh, you should buy only food containers that have plastic in them? And then you find out, oh, the oil industry put that funding out for that report. Okay, so you have to start thinking about the way you would think about buying something. Find better coverage. This doesn't necessarily mean value better coverage, it means more inclusive. So if I'm reading a news report from a source and I think this doesn't really sound right, try going to another source that you routinely get accurate information from and search that source for the same topic. Or do a Google search for what you're looking at and compare what several sources say. I noticed that Tara had put on the tables some reliable sources. There are sources out there that are still reliable. BBC out of the UK is very, very good. Canadian Broadcasting System, also very good, CBC. They do not have the same sort of incentive to slant the news the way other people do, for left or right, okay? And if you get an idea and read several different sources, right, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And you'll get an idea of what the information is. Okay, and then trace claims, quotes, and media back to the original context. Unfortunately, with AI and deep fakes and just manipulations of image, this is super important. Does the image really exist, or is it an AI photograph? Does the caption to the image really go to that image? If you're seeing a graph with numbers, are the scales the same? A lot of times you'll see graphs in the newspaper and they'll have two graphs next to each other comparing. Well, it's not apples to apples, it's like apples to pineapples, because one scale will be like 1 to 100 and one's like 1 to 5. And you think you're looking at the same thing. And they're assuming you're not going to be an informed consumer. They're assuming you're not going to use critical thought the same way you use before you purchase something or you pick an entertainment to bring your family to. Check for all sorts of misrepresentations of quotes or taking things out of context, or maybe they asked one question and they're taking the answer from a different question. So try to go back to the original as much as you can, okay? So just in summary, think of SIFT, right? Stop, investigate, find, and trace. And remember, all forms of media have bias. It doesn't matter if they're trying to sell you tennis shoes or they're trying to sell you a tax break. All forms of media have a purpose. Are they trying to sell something? Are they trying to entertain you? Are they trying to educate you? Are they trying to confuse you? Are they trying to maybe influence you one way or another? Some media messaging is, in fact, designed to confuse you, to mislead you, to outright lie to you. Okay? You have to be way more attuned and informed than we ever had before in the US. And critical thought and processes like SIFT are going to be your friends, because we can no longer just trust what we see and hear. We really have to evaluate it. So thank you very much. And